I'm privileged to say we're joined by John Giles to look ahead to the World Cup final, which is inching ever closer in the Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow. France versus Croatia. John, you're very welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Richie.
I want to know, as a fan, do you still get a buzz off a World Cup final? Because I was saying to you before when you were in here, like I was born, I think, between a semi-final and a final in '82. So literally my life is measured in 4-year spans between World Cups. Yeah. But as someone obviously who's been that closely involved in football, you've covered so many World Cups between RTE and ourselves over the course of the last number of decades. Do you still get a charge out of a day like today?
Yeah. Well, it's. I think Eamon said to me one time, which was true. Like, the World Cup is an examination every 4 years of where we are in the game. Internationally.
Yeah.
Like, we see Argentina this year not so good. You know, we see teams, Spain for example, a few years were brilliant, winning the World Cup. So we, like, when I live in England, I watch, and people come over to Ireland a lot, but we watch the Premiership and we watch different things. But we're not familiar really well, I'm not anyway, with what's happening in Argentina, what's happening in Brazil. But when it comes to the World Cup, they all come together. And it's a true test. Like, where are they? What are they doing? For example, I tipped Brazil, say, to win the World Cup. Didn't really know that much about it. Only what I knew of the players that they had, but didn't really know. I didn't know they play a very negative midfield pair in it. So it's an examination every 4 years of who's doing what, and that's what's happened this year. Again, I mean, look at all the major teams. Germany went out, Portugal went out, Spain went out, Argentina went out. You know, like, that you wouldn't expect.
And the likes of Italy not even there.
It's not even there. You know, Holland's not even there. So, you know, England have come on, as we've seen getting to the semi-finals. France didn't particularly fancy at the start of it. I tipped Croatia as an outsider, but very much an outsider.
I hope you put money on it.
I never put money on. I'll leave that to Eamon and Liam. They put a few bets on.
Yeah.
So it's an examination every 4 years, and I think it's been a good examination again this year. It's a true examination because it's there for everybody to see. You've got the group games for the teams can play enough matches to show what they really do. Because you see a team once and you think, oh, they're really good. You know, see them 3 or 4 times and they're not so good. So the teams have to get through the stages. There's a bit of luck involved in it along the way, and the draw and everything else. But that's the way it is.
Do you look at this as being the 2 finalists that the tournament deserves?
Well, I think when the 2 teams get to the final, Richie, ultimately they deserve to get there because they played, you know, enough matches. And even if they had a bit of luck early on, you still have to go through the quarterfinals and the semis, and that's when it really tells. I mean, I don't think you get through to the final on luck. You might have a bit of luck along the way, but ultimately you play the amount of matches you play. I think it's genuine whether you do or you don't.
This, on occasion, we see these lists of greatest players to never play in a World Cup finals. We see lists of players who've never won a World Cup or never played in a World Cup final. It's fantastic to see that Luka Modric, a player of his calibre, has the ability today to check himself off all of those lists, and he can he can cement himself, because we spoke before about how Mbappe, you know, he brought himself to the world's attention with that performance, say, against Argentina. Whereas, you know, we would have seen him do it for Monaco, do it for PSG, whatever. Modric today, he goes from being somebody who's, you know, known by football people into he's going to be known worldwide. He's one of these players that everybody's going to see and see what he does well this afternoon.
Yeah, it could be called Modric, because he's a very modest individual. Never, and I think. Well, I've always been not me. I've mostly been a great fan, but he's not a headliner in the way that he plays, because he's a midfield player and he's played with Ronaldo for quite a few years. And I mean, Real Madrid and Ronaldo wouldn't have done some of the things they did without Modric. But he doesn't get the headlines, you know. But
he's one of those players that allows the Ronaldos to play.
Exactly.
That allows the
it
players.
It wouldn't be the same without him, Richie. But it wouldn't be as spectacular. He wouldn't get the headlines. So therefore, you have what you have from him. He's without question been in the last 5 or 6 years, and certainly today, the best midfield player of his type.
You review him so highly, yeah.
Oh yeah. I always have. I mean, even when he was at Spurs when he was younger. There's very few of those players around, as we can see, even in the World Cup. I mean, you mentioned Modric as a top midfield player. You mentioned De Bruyne, who didn't actually play. One of the criticisms I would have of Martinez, didn't actually play in the position that he played for Manchester City all season. But that's by the way. But there's very, very few of those players around today. We look at the Premiership, around the world. We've seen a lot of teams in the world, and then I know we had the big teams went out, but one of the reasons they went out was because they didn't have players like Modric. So he is the best, and has been for quite a few years now, Richie, the best of his type. See, midfield players, what you're supposed to do as a midfield player is link the back to the front. Full-backs can't be creative. Centre-halves are not creative. They can defend. And once they defend, then they have to have somebody to give it to link what they've done defensively up to the attack. Like it's safe. I think England suffered because it didn't have a midfield. They win it at the back. Nobody to give it to. And you saw Harry Kane coming deep, all that. It doesn't suit the team. Modric, well, as soon as the full-back gets it, Modric is only 10 or 12 yards away. Then he does his stuff, links it up, then you have a team. And that's what he does better than anybody else. And I'd say if they didn't have Modric in their team, they definitely wouldn't have reached the World Cup.
Yeah, one of the great privileges we had out in the office, I think it was the night they bet Argentina 3-0. Modric got the second of those three. As you were sat beside us out in the office. Yeah. And you were able to point out all the good things that Modric was doing, things that don't necessarily jump off the screen immediately.
Most people don't even notice it, because he makes it look so simple. Now, I saw the I'm not into stats, but I think the stats against England the other night, he covered more ground than anybody else. We didn't look at, because he drifts into positions and he covers the ground. And see, when you hear people talking about football, generally, Richie, they very seldom have ever mentioned positional sense. Right? It's hardly mentioned. You talk about three at the back and four at the back. But positional sense actually is the most important thing on the pitch, because there's only one ball. And you have to get in, and there's 20 players out there vying for position, right? And when you see Modric playing, you guess, oh, he's plenty of room on the ball, because he gets in the right position to receive the ball. And that means, like, if the fullback is ball's played to the fullback, he's over to the fullback. You don't even notice. He's run over to the fullback before the ball is still in the air. So when the fullback gets it, you can't give it to anybody else but Modric. That's an art in itself, but it's not noticeable. Because when most people watch the match, they're watching to follow the ball, right? But you'll find that with Modric, say he's near the left back and he can't get it. The left back is going to hit a long ball to the right back. While the ball's in the air, he's getting over to the right back. Nobody sees that, except he's there when the fullback gets it. So that's a genius situation in itself, and that's what real midfield players do. And again, you say, well, you have to give it to Modric. Now he's on his own, because even the opposition, say he's being man-marked, even the opposition don't follow the ball when it's in the air. They're watching something else. They're watching the ball, but they're not following the ball. Modric is watching the ball, but he's following it. So when the right back gets it, he's only 10 or 12 yards away from him, right? Inside, then he's always out the position to himself. After that, it's having the ability to pick out the right pass. But that's actually the easy part for Modric.
That almost seems at odds with what Kante I was going to say for Chelsea, but we kind of think from those terms. But for France, almost works in those same areas as Modric is now. He'll try and link the full-backs. He'll try and provide that outlet to a full-back and then provide a pass for someone forward. It seems the vision for Modric seems slightly more improved or slightly more developed, let's say, than Kante's. But Kante's going to get there, you think?
Kante does it well, really well. I love Kante. I think he's terrific. He's an honest lad. He wouldn't have the quite the distribution
Modric
class that Modric has. But he wins the ball better than Modric. You see, what's happened today, Richie, in the game, you've got attacking midfield players and you've got defensive holding midfield players, which is a total myth, right? You have midfield players. Kante wins as many tackles as Dyer and Henderson put together, right? But he can get forward and link it up. Now, he's not going to score a great deal of goals, but he'll link it up. Dyer and Henderson, I'm only taking them as an example, never link anything up. So Kante is a midfield player. Modric is a midfield player who has a genius to be particularly creative, a little bit more creative than Kante. But Kante is a midfield player. He's not a defensive midfield player. He wins more tackles than anybody else, and he gets forward and helps the thing. So he's a midfield player. He's not in the,
I'm just going to
attacking midfield player. And what happens, and the biggest myth in the game, in my opinion, is the midfield player allows the other two players to go forward. Right? This is total nonsense. Where is the ball? What are they getting forward for if it's not in relation to the ball? You have midfield players.
Often in games, and we saw it to a degree with England and Croatia the other night, we see a contrast of styles, or a contrast of approaches, let's say, in how they approach the ball and how they try and set up the play. England, as you pointed out, were fairly light in midfield in terms of what they could do and how they could affect the game, whereas you had Rakitic, Modric, Brozovic, and even Perisic and stuff joining in on that front for Croatia. Whereas for today, we seem to have two evenly matched midfields for the most part. It seems almost that it's going to be a tug of war between the two. I mean, how are those kind of games usually settled? Because I don't think we're going to be in for a stalemate per se, but it'd be interesting to see the flow of this game.
Both teams can do it if they have the players to do it. I think they have. Like in the England case, you see, Richie, they didn't have a midfield at all. And they had Henderson as the only recognised midfield player he couldn't knit anything together, right? And then the rest were Dele Alli. You see, this is the gamble that Southgate took from the start. He didn't have a midfield from day one, like, because he had these lads, Dele Alli, Sterling up front, Kane up front. He had 5 players in front of the ball most of the time. Now that was okay against Panama and Tunisia, but when they felt the real test against Croatia, especially after the first 45 minutes, and I think they were in awe of England, actually, Croatia, but then decided they're not that good. Then they totally dominated the game. And see, there's only one ball on the pitch. And actually, England got tired, because in the second half, they were chasing the ball, because Modric was on the ball, chasing it. They're chasing it now, because they had nobody to get a hold of the ball first of all, take the pressure. And Modric being the master midfield player. See, when you're playing in that position, in Brazil, you can slow the game down. Right? You can get it. It looks like you're slowing the game down, because you can hold the ball, give it to a player, and he usually gives it to a player in a good position. Now you've got possession of the ball, right? Then England now are chasing the ball. So England couldn't get the ball to do the same to Croatia. So they looked twice as fit as they did in the second half. So it's all about possession of the ball. They had that. England had no midfield players to get the ball at all.
But on today's game, is there a worry that both midfields could almost negate each other and that they'll both try and take the sting out of the game, and you could be left with not necessarily a kind of a pedestrian kind of game, but it'll definitely be at a slower pace.
It never be pedestrian. It's slowed down at the right time.
Right.
See, what I'm saying about Modric's not actually slowing the game down. It looks like it's slowing it down, because he gets on the ball, he keeps the ball, and he gives it to somebody in a good position. That's what good players do. Now, the player on the ball now has time to do it. It's not slowing it down. Actually, it's quickening the game up for the opposition. Right, and to get back to today's game, of course, every game that you play in football is a battle in the middle. If you win the battle of midfield, you're going to win it. Most times, win the game. So the big battle today is obviously going to be in midfield, because we've got Kante on one side, Pogba, and Matuidi is that the same, who's a good midfield, and then you've got Modric, Rakitic. And the other, Brozovic. No, I'm not great at these names, Richie. But that's what we have. Now, I think the key today is Pogba.
Right.
If Pogba plays like he did the other day in the semi-final, which was very good, and he played like a real pro, a real player. Now, if he plays like that today, I think he's going to give France the advantage. If he plays like the social media kid that we've seen with the haircut and the tricks and all that, then I think Croatia could do them.
This World Cup has showed, I suppose, to a degree of what Paul Pogba can do, because it's been his most consistent spell that I can remember. Because obviously, as you mentioned, you get to play with the same group of players, you get to play 7 games, you get a decent judgment of where certain teams are at. You get a decent judgment of where certain players are at as well. And with Pogba, when he's in the right environment, and France seems to suit him, and Deschamps seems to get not necessarily the best, but he get the better side of him more often.
Well, he's done it in one match, Richie. He's only done it in one match, which was the last match in the semi-final. He played really well. He was doing his tricks, and he was a little bit better than he played for Manchester United, but not much. But definitely the other night, he was a real pro. He got back, he got headers away, he played the way he should play the game. See, he's he's not so young, he's 24 now, but he's a social media kid nowadays. I'm an old-timer, and I'm not into it at all. But I think he is more interested in being a social media star than being a great footballer, because he does all the tricks and all the things. And usually it's a load of rubbish, what he's doing. He's probably making a fortune doing what he's doing in his social media time and all that. But whether Deschamps got a grip of him the other day, and it's taken him a time to do, because he's been in the French time. It's the first time I've seen him play for Manchester United or France in a professional way, and he was really good.
Even in that game against Uruguay, didn't impress you the same way?
He was better.
Yeah.
He was better, but not quite like if you look at little Kante, for example, he does nothing but everything for the team. Everything for the team. Now, Pogba is the opposite. And he might have done something against in the quarterfinals that was not quite as blatant as he did, but he was still doing a few tricks and all that. Whereas the other night there was no tricks. He was really good, and he played. And I think in my opinion, he's key today. This is going to be a big battle in midfield. There are very good midfield players out there today. If he doesn't play as a professional, then Kante and Matuidi are going to be down one against these guys who will do it. Rakitic, I've no doubt about the Croatian players playing in a professional way. So I think that's what it rests on to me. That's what I'm going to be watching. If Pogba is doing his tricks, I'll tell you what you might understand. This sounds a bit crazy. I felt he was in the right mood before the match the other day. Do you know why?
Go on.
He'd no stuff in his hair. Right?
That can't just be the only reason.
No, it's a sign that this guy is not playing today for all the things that we've seen him play for before social media. That sounds a bit daft, but when I saw him, I thought that's unusual. His hair is just normal, right? And he went out and played it. Now, hopefully, if you see all the signs in his hair today, Richie, just be looking out. Is he going to be Mr. Media, social media? Now, I hope for France's sake that he goes out, plays like a pro like he played today. I think he will give France the advantage because they're going to be pretty well matched in midfield, and I think France are better suited elsewhere with the players that they have. You know, with Griezmann and Mbappe.
You think it's that final third that France are probably overmatching Croatia?
They do have more.
Yeah.
Like Mandzukic did well the other day, but he's not quite. I don't think they have the firepower that France are capable of having. So if they match them in midfield, if the three of them match the Croatians in midfield, I think the other lads will give them the edge.
There is a theory that France have almost been playing, not necessarily in second gear, but there are still some levels for them to go through. The way they saw off Uruguay, which a lot of people were impressed with Uruguay throughout the course of the tournament, up until that quarter-final, given the fact they'd only conceded once up until then. And then to see off the Belgian side, that maybe coming into the tournament, I don't think a lot of people necessarily had the greatest expectations of them because they hadn't gelled as a side up until then. But they looked great throughout the course of this tournament and are more than worth a third-place finish in it. They've seen off some really good opposition in those last two matches of France and done it really professionally.
Yeah. I didn't fancy them, Richie, before the thing. I didn't think Deschamps was getting the best from the players. In the Euros, for example, he left Kante out of the team. I don't think he did everything well. Obviously, they've done very, very well so far. I'd have to mention, if you don't mind, Martinez for Belgium made it easy for them in terms of in the match against Brazil. He allowed the three players, Lukaku, De Bruyne and Hazard to stay up and not defend. Told them not to, could see it, to not defend. Let them, and what he was saying, I'm sure, was, and when we get the ball, we'll hit them on the break.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what he should have been saying was, if we get the ball, that is a big gamble. I mean, that's totally against what Guardiola believes at Manchester City, who's the best manager in the Premier League last year. All the players have to work hard from the front. That was a wing and a prayer, and he got away with it. And I felt before the second match against France, if he does the same again, then France will beat them. He didn't do the same again, but he did something just as bad. He didn't play De Bruyne in his best position. De Bruyne last year was the best midfield player in the league, in the position he played in, and he played as a midfield general, getting forward at the right time. The other night, you had Fellaini, Dembele, and the other lad in midfield. And De Bruyne was ahead of the ball. He should have been dictating the play. That was his best position in the Premier League. And the main tactic of any manager, play your best players in your best position. You didn't do that. And France deserved to beat them. Anyway, that's only just a little rant at Martinez, because I think he made a mess of it. But France today...
Well, France still needed to see them off, and did so in a really professional
way. Did it well.
Yeah.
Did it because they controlled the midfield again. You know, they actually controlled, and with Pogba playing particularly well as a pro, Kante in there, Matuidi in there, they actually controlled the game in a way. Now, when they got the goal, they sat back until they got but that's what most teams do. But they deserve to beat Belgium. There's no doubt about that. So going into the match today, that's my reservation with France. I think I fancy them to win, but they have to have Pogba playing in a professional way.
Griezmann's had a quiet World Cup so far.
He has.
He's scored a couple of times along the way, but he's not the. I don't know. He's not the player we saw 2 years ago at the Euros, and maybe that's more of a Deschamps trying to instill a team ethic thing that's also brought Pogba along and has ultimately brought them to a second consecutive final.
You can be a team man. It shouldn't affect anybody's play. You know what I mean? Griezmann hasn't played as well as we all. I didn't. He's not as well. He hasn't played as well as I expected him to play, and I think that would be the general consensus. He just hasn't. Might be on the day he'll do it. He's a terrific player, as we know, but he hasn't quite done it yet.
He's been aided somewhat by having a very on-form Kylian Mbappe, who today becomes only the third teenager. Like, I found this an incredible stat because you kind of just figure that there would have been more along the way, especially since we're going back to 1930, but that there would have been more than just the two teenagers playing in World Cup finals.
It's amazing. I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought, I was brought up on Pele, who was only 17 when he did it. But, it's like 19 is not young in football. Not really, But
it's when you've been to a Champions League semi-final and you're playing in one of the biggest side, the biggest side in France, and you're doing okay for yourself if you're Kylian Mbappe. He shouldn't be overawed by this occasion. You would hope.
I don't think he will be overawed. I mean, you see, with lads who are made of the right stuff, it's natural for them to come into these environments and do their stuff. And I find with top players, there's an element of show off in a player. Although they're modest, they want to get on the stage. They're not scared of it. If you were scared of it, you're not going to. You wouldn't be at this stage anyway.
Well, that's the very nature of being a professional footballer.
Exactly.
Is the anticipation that you're going to be week in and week out in front of 20 odd, 30, 40, 50,000 people.
Exactly.
And doing what you do. I work off the presumption that nobody can see me. Now, granted, all these cameras put a light to that, but it's much easier to think you're able to do what you do when there's nobody looking at you.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you see, I found with football, the top lads that I met anyway, there was a show off element in him. And Bobby Charlton, I played with Bobby Charlton, for example. He was the best player I ever played with or against. And Bobby was the most modest lad you ever wished to meet. But I know when Bobby was out in the field, he knew what he could do, and he wanted to show people. That's what he grew up looking at players that he idolised himself, to get out on the pitch to show what I can do, not in a big-headed way, but in a professional way. And Bobby would come from that stock. Like, he's a young fella, he's 19, but in his head he's not 19. In his head he's out there in the World Cup final, and I'm going to show everybody what I can do. That's what they call handling the situation. Yeah. Because if you get lads who can't handle the situation, you'd know it before you're 19. Because you have to grow up with it. No, he's been, say, a young kid, a terrific player for years, and then he goes to a club maybe at 15. So at his own level, he has to do it. And you grow into that. Then when you come to the 19 there, you have to become a man in football terms at a very early age.
But that's a two-way street as well, because those around you have to be able to rely on you. Even if you're, there's no asterisk beside you going, but he's 19, it's okay if he makes a mistake. You have to be completely on the same level as your teammates.
They can't carry you along. I had a similar experience at a much lower level when I was picked for the Irish team. I was just short of 19. I'd only played two first-team matches for Manchester United. But I'm in the dressing room with lads I'd idolised. Noel Cantwell, Charlie Hurley, Pat Sayward, Georgie Cummins. These were men, right? But I knew on the day, I'm sitting with them in the dressing room, I have to do my stuff. I can't say, hang on lads, I'm only 18, I'm not going to... you're a man. When you're out there, you're a man. You've got to go out and do your stuff.
But that's where that show-off element almost comes into its own, and that you want to be able to prove that you're up there with the Kantés, the Dimitris, the
Actually, I remember my own feelings. I was nervous, of course you're nervous, but I was looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I wasn't shaking, because you have to handle the nerves. But there's, as I say, most players, there's a show-off element. I know from my own experience, I wanted to get out there. I wasn't nervous. I was nervous, and I was, like most players, because you have to be nervous. Nervous, it drives you on as well.
Good nervous energy, yeah.
But looking forward to it at the same time. If you're dreading it, Richie, you ain't going to do it,
You're in trouble then. One of those people that I'd imagine will enjoy today greatly, given the fact that he was seen as a second-line striker maybe at Arsenal, and he went to Chelsea almost as a second option for them, Olivier Giroud, who's led the line gallantly for France throughout this World Cup. Maybe not necessarily has had the chances go his way, but there's one of these, there's a video going around, I think it was last night or the night before, in the build-up to this final anyway. There's a bunch of people waiting outside the France team hotel. They're waiting for autographs from the players. The only one to stop for them is Giroud, and they don't necessarily want his autograph. And it's genuine and it's unfortunate. But he's kind of viewed as in a different way as Deschamps was viewed as the unfashionable member of that side in '98. Giroud's almost viewed as the unfashionable member of this side in 2018.
I'm sure he is, Richie. I think he is by us as well. Yeah. Like he's gone from Chelsea, Arsenal to Chelsea because he wasn't wanted, and he's always been even for his last year or two at Arsenal. He was only coming on a sub, but an effective sub. But there's one thing you will get from him, which is everything he's got. He's as honest as the day is long. He's not the best in the world, but that's, honesty is a huge element of a team ethic, if that's the right word. That he'll do, he's going to do his best.
It's something that you can rely upon more if you're a manager.
Totally. Yeah. When he goes out there, unfortunately, I think he's been a bit unlucky not to score a goal, because he has scored quite a few goals in his career. He hasn't scored in this particular thing, but he's led the line well for the others to score. Because he's honest, he's never shirks anything. I think he's a terrific lad. Obviously, he's not the best in the world, but he's very, very useful. But he suits the team in the way that they play. Because you say Griezmann hasn't played quite as well, but today it might be a little knock on from Giroud. He's going to do the best he possibly can. Yeah. And that's all you can ask of anybody.
And he's definitely going to ask, given his physicality, he's going to ask questions of Dejan Lovren, who pointed these quotes out to you earlier. He's saying when he was asked after the England game, there's a lot of quotes from the Croatia players after the England games, he said, "I took Liverpool to the final of the Champions League. Now my national team were in the final. I think people should recognise that I'm also one of the best defenders in the world and not just talk nonsense."
And this is Lovren.
Yeah, well, he set himself, if ever there was somebody setting himself up for a fall.
Actually, I saw after they beat Manchester City and Liverpool beat them in the Champions League. He spoke in the papers I saw as the guy who inspired them at half time. Now, this is a guy. He's one of the reasons I would go for France today, because when you got somebody speaking like that, they're usually the most insecure guys ever. Because they're trying to convince people that they're good.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the great players that I've known don't try to convince anybody. They don't have to convince anybody. They get out on the pitch and they do it. The fact is, he's not a good defender. And he's trying to convince everybody. He's a great defender. But the only way he can convince anybody is out on the pitch. And what happens with comments like this, it makes him look foolish. And puts the spotlight on him more than ever before.
If ever there's a player who should keep quiet, because I think by his standards, by what we've known from him from Liverpool over the course of the past 2 seasons, he's had an okay World Cup.
Okay,
He hasn't done anything catastrophic. There's been no moments where we thought, Jesus Christ, Lovren's at it again, apart from when he opened his mouth here. But he's had an okay World Cup. The last thing you want to do is start to draw attention on yourself, to start to point a light on yourself and go, "Oh look, I'm doing great. Whoops, I've slipped."
Richie, the great players don't do that. They let what they say is they let their feet do the talking for them, and he's just an insecure guy. And I wouldn't be surprised if one player on the pitch was going to let the team down, he could be it.
Yeah, that level of insecurity you mentioned insecurity there from Lovren. It seemed to be there to a degree from the Croatia side, when they were speaking after the England game about how they were underestimated, about how people were talking them down, about people were saying that they were tired when they weren't. They seem to have been using a lot of outside influences that I don't know. If I'm a manager, I'm not that keen on it, because you can only draw upon that from that well once. You can't necessarily do it in one game and say, right, we're after getting inspiration from the fact that everyone was saying we're knackered and everybody was saying we're not as good and everyone saying the other side are in the final. You can only do that once. I think they've nothing to draw upon on a similar level here against France.
We don't know if they drew on that or not. We don't know, Richie. But it happens in football, and it happens quite regularly in football. They shouldn't be bothered with that. It doesn't matter what people say. When you go out on the pitch, what people say doesn't stop you from playing.
But even people like Modric seem to have these quotes from the British press
I think football generally like to be underdogs, right? Because there's not much expected of you, right? And I think that happens with most teams. We're the underdogs. We want to be the underdogs because, if you get the lads who are expected to win, they don't win, then they're humiliated. It's a bit of self-protection as professional footballers. But I do believe in the match the other day, I think against England, I think they were intimidated by England, by their reputation.
That bore out in the first half to a degree.
Yeah. They didn't play in the first half, Richie. And I played for Ireland in the old days, when we did that against nearly every team. And after the match, we'd be sitting down and say, they weren't that good. But it was too late.
Yeah.
Now, I think what happened the other night, whether it was the manager, whether it was Modric, because they didn't start. England were well on top on the other end. They didn't start at all. Modric was doing okay, but they didn't play at all. There was somebody at half-time, whether it was the manager or whether it was Modric, and I'm only saying, I wasn't in the dressing room, said, these guys are not that good. We've got to start playing here. Yeah. These guys, they're okay, but they're not what they're supposed to be. Because they'd all have names, like they play for Arsenal, they play for Manchester United, they play for, and they're usually hyped because the Premier League's supposed to be the best in the world. And Modric, I think, played in the Premier League for a few seasons. And I think he was a leader to say, listen, lads, look, we've got to go and play here. These guys are not that great.
But you've also got there shouldn't be an intimidation factor there when you figure in that Modric has won the Champions League in each of the last 3 seasons.
But he's only one player, Richie.
But Rakitic is at Barcelona the last number of years. Yeah. He's done really well for them. You've got lads, Mario Mandzukic has played for Atletico Madrid and now at Juventus.
Richie,
there shouldn't be an intimidation
I know
factor.
the teams they played. I'm only giving you my take on what could have happened.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what, I don't care who they played for. And they shouldn't have been.
That shouldn't have been in their minds.
In their minds.
Yeah.
But football is funny. I've been in the dressing room, Richie, you'd be amazed. And I was in the Irish dressing room for years before we got together. And especially after the match, that team weren't all that.
Yeah.
They weren't all that. We could have done it. It was too late. I think something happened. There was a dramatic change in the approach from Croatia in the second half of the first. You would agree with everybody. I don't know what happened. I'm only giving you my guess. That in the dressing room after, somebody, whether it was Modric, the manager, said, Jesus, lads, we have to start playing here.
There was a recalibration.
These guys are not that good. We've played against them because they totally dominated them from the start of the second half, didn't they? And deserved to beat them in the second half and extra time. They were a different team altogether. But why would they be a different team in the second half if there wasn't something dramatic happened at half time? You know?
Yeah. You're not a big believer in the fact that these 3 rounds of extra time and penalties in 2 of them has had an impact on Croatia, or should have an impact on Croatia.
I don't think it will. I don't think it will, Richie, because they played it was supposed to be an issue before the England game, and it turned out not to be an issue. They were stronger than England in the second half, and they were stronger in after extra time. Now, you have to forget about the previous 2. You have to take of how they're going to feel from that particular match on Wednesday, wasn't it? Wednesday. So they got Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday to get over it. I think as a professional footballer, you can do that, provided that the management don't make you overtrain in that period. Rest. They have the stamina, the body recovers, and the body, in my opinion, when you're as fit as those lads are, will recover by Sunday. Only if, like Thursday, had to be off, hot baths, massage, right? Friday, go out and have a stroll. Have a little, just get it loosen out. Back in, rest. Saturday, the same. Little sprint, 2 sprints, out. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, in. Hot bath, massage, rest. And I think they'll be fine.
They'll be fine.
It can work for you, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's like a runner training for the Olympics, and he's a 15-metre, and he's doing cross-country and that, to get the stamina.
Yeah.
Right? It's the sharpness then you need. But if they have the stamina now for the match has gone to extra time. Now they need the freshness. And if they rest for those days, I think they'd be better than if they'd played only last week.
And they've showed in 6 games up until to today's point anyway that they know what they do, they know how to play with one another, they know how to get the best out of one another, and they've got the confidence to rely upon themselves. They've got the fact to
obviously have the temperament now, not to overrate France. Like it should be a big lesson.
Yeah.
We beat England. Don't overrate anybody. Get out and take the match on its merits, right? As long as they don't say, well, France, look at who's there now. And we'll know after 15, 20 minutes where that is the case. But there would be a huge lesson to have learned against England. Don't overrate anybody.
Yeah. You mentioned Lovren and Vida as a potential weak link for Croatia, whereas you look at their opposite numbers for France. That duo Varane and Umtiti at the back for them has been key. They have built a fantastic defence. Where there have been question marks before the tournament, they've actually nullified all of them, and they've actually been fine and
been good,
among the best performers that we've seen so far. And that's again when they're going up against the likes of Mandzukic, could probably be one of the winning factors of this game for France.
Oh, definitely. I think they've done really well. But again, it goes back to the midfield. You see, if the midfield is doing the stuff for you, Richie, you're usually on the front foot. You're going at the other end of the pitch. Not all the time, but if they can control the midfield, Croatia, then you're keeping away from what could be a potential weakness. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't do it for 90 minutes, but you can do it for
They're offering a shield, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it is. That's what teams are about. That's why midfield is so important. That if you dictate from the midfield, you're obviously getting at their back four, and it's a double plus, because you're going to try and expose what they're good at, but you're protecting your own back four from any potential weakness they have. So that's all part of the game in doing that. Obviously, the complete teams have defenders who can do it anyway. They're really top-class defenders. But the more you can keep the pressure off them, the less likely they are to make a mistake.
If I had to push you for a prediction, one way or the other?
I'll go for France.
In the 90?
It could go to extra time. I wouldn't... I think I'll go for France, yeah.
Okay.
Only just. These guys are tough guys. Croatia are tough guys. They showed that. They're game lads. They'll have a go. I don't think it'll be easy for France. I think it'll be a good game. But if I was putting a few bob on it...
And you're not?
And I'm not. I think I would go with France.
Sean, thanks so much for taking time out to speak. It's been an absolute privilege.
Thanks, Richie.